Good morning. I'm Rosemary Vasiliadis, Director of Aviation, and this item is to present the closeout summary for the LAS Metroplex, which is the airspace study. And we have two members from FAA that were part of the project team. Cameron Swan, who is our Deputy Regional Administrator for the Western Pacific region, and Jim O'Reilly, who is the Metroplex Program Administrator.
No, and I would just ask that you respond to all the questions from the FAA that the residents have. I mean, you can go through the report all day long, but I want to hear how you're going to respond to them and what change and what hasn't changed.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'd like to begin by thanking you for affording us time to bring this agenda.
Can you state your name for the record?
Sorry, Tamara, T-A-M-A-R-A, Swan, S-W-A-N-N.
Okay, go ahead.
I am the Deputy Regional Administrator for the Western Pacific region. With me is Jim O'Reilly, Program Team Manager for the Airspace Modernization Group for the FAA. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank everyone who's been involved, especially Rosemary and our team, for the positive attitude and critical and constructive input from the very beginning of this project. Rosemary serves as a very important advocate of not only the airport, but also of this board and the communities surrounding the airport throughout the entire process. This is not my first time standing in front of you. I have represented the Regional Administrator's Office on this project since the beginning of 2015. The Las Vegas Metroplex is part of the modernization of the entire United States air transportation system, modernizing, making it safer, the flow of air traffic, emphasizing safety, increasing efficiency, and improving environmental performance. We introduced over 40 new satellite-based procedures here in the Las Vegas area. The final report was presented in November of 2015. Our design team stood up in 2017. We overcame many unprecedented delays, the first being the sequestration and shutdown of the federal government, where this affected the entire project. We then, of course, had a delay due to COVID-19, and that delay caused issues with access to the facilities, reduced personnel within those facilities, training and travel restrictions for those of us on the team. We still were able to meet our meeting requirements through virtual meetings and virtual oversight. I'm here representing the Regional Administrator's Office. Jim is here to handle technical questions. I'm not a subject matter expert. So I'll turn the presentation over to Jim as well.
I am also happy to be back. My name is Jim O'Reilly, spelled A-R-R-I-G-H-I, and as part of my duties as the Airspace Modernization Team Manager, I'm also the National Metroplex Program Manager for the 11 Metroplex sites. You know, on the surface, when we look at the numbers of procedures that we implemented in 2021 in February, that just scratches the surface of what we're doing. When you look up and you see those airplanes flying, those are the performance-based navigation procedures that are the backbone of that infrastructure modernization that we undertook in the Metroplex Project. Some of the other things that you don't see was work done on the en route modernization system, at Los Angeles Air Traffic Control Center, the standard terminal modernization system here, the automation system for the TRACON. And the other things you don't see are the time-based flow management system adjustments that are made in the system that are all based upon these PBN, the performance-based navigation procedures. The reason I put Los Angeles Center and the TRACON at the top of this list is because those were long-term asks from those two facilities that we made some changes to the airspace serving the Las Vegas Valley. You know, very constrained airspace, a lot of military airspace around us, and there were a lot of challenges with the older systems and the older procedures in providing service. So key things were changes to the airspace sectorization for the Los Angeles Center and also for the TRACON. The procedures that we implemented, the ones that you look up and you see fly by your house or fly over your head, standard instrument departures, those are accurate and repeatable and concur with the citizens from District 1. Those are noticeable. If they fly near your house, you are definitely going to see them. 14 standard terminal arrival procedures. Those are some of our hallmark procedures. They allow us to provide an optimized profile of descent that's fuel efficient, quieter arrival procedures. The standard instrument approach procedures that we implement those. We provide connectivity to the runway. And we have several different types. I'm going to give you an example here on the next slide. We also made a couple of changes. We made changes to the low altitude airways. We incorporated 5, and then we made changes to a couple of the higher altitude PBN airways where we incorporated 1 new procedure and 2 amended procedures. For Las Vegas, you got another feather in your cap for having a first in the national airspace system. I'd like to just point out one of the things that we did that was unique here in Las Vegas. An Rnp procedure, that's a required navigation performance procedure that has special aircraft and air crew performance requirements associated with it. What it lets you do is start an approach in the opposite direction of the runway you're going to land on, and then fly what we call an RF, or a radius of fixed procedure. That's that yellow arc that you see. You can only do that with those Rnp procedures. Well, the first in the mass, what we did here is develop a transition to the ILS procedures that are normally straight in, that allow us to start the procedure 180 out from where the procedure ends up, and then also connect to the en route procedure, that STAR, standard terminal arrival, and it provides us with a seamless path from the en route environment all the way down to the runway. That flew really well for us here in Las Vegas. The controllers say they can hardly see the difference between the radius to fix, the ARC procedure, and this new overlay of that particular procedure. Some of the things that Tamara mentioned, that we also do an implementation team. We stand up a team of experts who monitor the implementation for the first week or so to make sure things are going okay. Those are always anticipated challenges in there. Some of them with those automation systems, there are a lot, I like to say there are a lot of zeros and ones involved in there. It's all programming those computers and those automation systems to work correctly with the new procedure. So inevitably we see those types of things. We work to resolve those. Databases for the aircraft. The aircraft have to have a correct database in the flight management system to fly these things. Inevitably, because those things are uploaded in commercial aircraft as they transit through specific bases. Sometimes airplanes, are already airborne before the new database takes effect, and they're not able to fly the new procedure. So we have alternate procedures for those aircraft. Those things typically resolve themselves as they do here. Flight plan filing, that's another thing with the, we work really hard with the different operators and their flight plan filing systems to give them the new procedures, the correct procedures, how we want them to file them. Inevitably, there's a lot of complexities involved in those systems too. We have to go and work with them to make sure that they're filing them correctly. The one thing one challenge procedurally, we're going to talk about the Gidget and the Rat Pack for a minute here. And first I want to thank, Commissioner Naft and the representatives here from District A, but in particular also the Director of Aviation, who drew to our attention with clarity that was not being used correctly when we implemented it. We assessed that, we determined that was absolutely correct. It was only modeled and intended to be used by general aviation and I want to say limited numbers of commercial aircraft, which is the way we modeled that procedure. And we found that some of those A and B operators were not using policing that correctly. Air traffic wasn't policing it. We worked with air traffic and those operators to bring it back to what we expected. We've monitored that, and we believe that that is not a challenge. I know that doesn't make the noise situation for District A any better than it is now. Post-implementation analysis, we always do analysis of the initial study team results. Those are notional procedures. The environmental assessment does, modeling based upon, that is required by NEPA and by FAA orders. And then subsequent to the implementation, we look at the actual procedures as they're being flown by actual aircraft, and we assess them for, efficiency. Basically, three measures of efficiency. We want to look at the fuel burn, we look at the distance flown, and we look at the time, time differences for the different procedures. And of course, because it's, it is also a modeling, not every airplane is flying every procedure exactly the way that it was intended. We have to make some allowances, in the modeling and the post-implementation analysis. In this case, because COVID really threw us for a loop, we took two other airports, Tucson and Phoenix, who have similar traffic models, and we also did regression analysis on them to, make sure that our modeling was spot on. Overall, our estimates were that we saved, there was a fuel burn improvement on the arrivals, certainly. We had a slight increase in distance. Now that's overall all the arrivals from what we call four corner posts, the four directions that we entered the airspace in. But we had a decrease in overall minutes flown. So, that's one of those things that sometimes we have a trade-off. We gain time on some corners, we lose time on others. Departures, we typically gain a lot in the fuel burn improvement, distance savings, and the time flown when we're looking at departure procedures. So the annualized benefits, we did a high and a low, a pre-COVID and a post-COVID. We would expect that when we return to a higher level of traffic, that you're going to see upwards of over 1 million gallons of fuel. That's about $2.8 million. This morning I had our analysts look at it again. That equates to 8.4 thousand metric tons of CO2 reduction. So there's a pretty significant environmental benefit there. I'd like to move on. This project team, and that team includes the Department of Aviation, as our partner. They're mentioned in all of the nominations for different awards that we received. The Air Traffic Organization Chief Operating Officer awarded the team the People First, NASCAR's People Always Collaboration Partnership and Success Team Award. A lot of that is based upon being able to get this done through COVID. Regional Administrator's Office highlighted the teamwork that was required. The Air Traffic Control Association, you might know them as ATCA. ATCA selected this project team, and that does include the airport, for the Team Award for Outstanding Achievement because of all this work that went on during the COVID-19 pandemic. Something that I feel compelled to bring to everyone's attention. Charlie Hall was near and dear to the hearts of many of us who, certainly from FAA headquarters, from his days when he helped stand up the Air Traffic Control System Command Center, when he was the hub manager here for Las Vegas for the tower and the TRACON. We know he left the fold for a little bit and went to work for American Airlines, but then came back, and I think it was almost a decade and a half working with Clark County Department of Aviation, where he was a key part of this project and advising the FAA. So we were sad to lose him. In his honor, we designated a waypoint, that's a navigation fix on a procedure for Las Vegas. That's called the Hoover 7. You can probably figure out what that's named after, but it's the C Hall, Charlie Hall waypoint in the middle of this page. So I'm say thanks and highlight how what a great impact, what a huge impact that Charlie has on all of us. I have nothing further. I think we're at the questions.
I think there are some, because I didn't hear the constituents' questions answered. So Commissioner Knapp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think perhaps you finished me a little bit early because I'm It was March 1st that I first contacted the FAA to raise the concerns of my constituents, specifically in Western Trails. I think what was most shocking to me as a former federal employee was the FAA's policy of not meeting with constituents. That, I know neither of you have say so in that, but I hope you'll continue to carry that message on as I have with our congressional delegation. I think that's totally outrageous. The Department of Aviation in my office is put in the middle of this, and we're the ones who get to be taking the heat on this, but it's not just the heat. The problem is we don't have any ability to fix it. So there ought to be some accountability there, and I trust and hope that you both carry that message up the chain, because that's just outrageous to me, that you have these public forums, you can come to a public meeting like this, but there's no ability within the agency to discuss the matters, the intimate details of the matter with residents that are impacted. I stated in the March 1st letter that the traffic overheard far exceeds the promises made by the FAA at multiple public meetings and discussions with RDOA staff and stakeholders. As you know, it was indicated at both the public meetings in December of 2019 and within the final EA that the new departure procedures would be primarily used by GA aircraft. And while clearly you are a subject matter expert and you're both familiar with what that means, I think it was more than a little disingenuous not to at least notify constituents and residents in the area that GA also means the Boeing aircraft, the Airbuses right now being utilized by Allegiant, by Delta, by Southwest, just because they're chartered planes. It's the same exact plane that has the same exact impact. It might as well be a commercial airliner when it's flying at the same elevation, when it's producing the same volume that a commercial airliner would. So I think when the FAA indicated that it would be small and minimal GA utilization, I find that comment particularly challenging. And I think there's no doubt that that's going to continue to increase. Obviously, during the time that was when you started working on this project to now, we obviously have much more intense uses here, which have had an impact. But could you speak a little bit to any ability for reevaluation now that we do have these increased uses as GA? And for those who might not be aware, every sports team that comes to town, including UNLV, the Raiders, every visiting team uses commercial airliners and they're tagged as GA. Is there any reevaluation opportunities? Are there any?
So the Metroplex project itself is closed. There is the opportunity through our normal, procedure development system to ask for, changes to those procedures, and certainly the agency is receptive to hearing those requests. Normally, when and I want to thank you again, because we consider feedback as a gift. So we do appreciate your comments.
But you're not done, you got 6 other commissioners, so.
It's all a gift, and that's why we're here, to represent them. So normally, we would not meet with individuals or with homeowners associations, and there's a reason for that. We normally would meet with the Florida County Commissioners. We would meet with the Department of Aviation. If you had a noise abatement board, a broad-based community board that was appointed by the commissioners, we would surely go out and meet with those types of groups.
So just for clarification, all it would have taken was for us to formally recognize neighbors as a act.
If you want to empower them as a broad-based group, I'll leave that, to make recommendations to you. I would leave that certainly to the Board of County Commissioners.
So we have the commitment that if we were to create that body of impacted neighbors, the FAA would meet with them to discuss one-on-one issues.
I'll leave that to you.
Well, I want to ask the question, why don't you meet with the neighbors? Because they're the ones that gotta live with it, so maybe we need to understand why you don't. I mean, it sounds elitist agency, you know what I mean? So I'm trying to understand why you don't meet with the neighbors, and is it, I don't want to create another body, but we do need a forum, because we do take it on the chin a lot for what, so maybe you could explain to us why you don't meet with the neighbors first and foremost.
I'll do my best. Really, I mean, bottom line is resources. We don't have the manpower to meet with individual homeowners associations or neighborhoods. What we have done in other areas is work through bodies such as roundtables. That is because we can't meet with one community without having other communities that may be impacted by the suggested changes without being represented. And that's why in other areas, so in the Western Pacific region, I represent California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, and everything Asia Pacific. So in other Metroplex areas in that region, we have worked continuously after post-Metroplex through the roundtable. Now, I do want to make sure that it's clear, we have met with the public numerous times during the Metroplex process. In fact, we've done probably an increased effort in outreach in this Las Vegas Metroplex because of lessons we've learned previously.
I think the challenge was, you're right, there were 5, I believe, public hearings held in 2019 and 2020. The problem was that some of the information that came out of there, I think, raised more questions. And so once the implementation occurred, that's when we sort of hit this hard point of not being able to address their concerns. That's where it became a frustration to me. The other issues that we've had largely surround weather, particularly wind. We happen to have a lot of wind here, so it's not unusual that that's a problem, which engages the rat pack and getting it departure paths. Is it your belief that we have truly, and I do credit DOA with educating our pilot groups and the airliners, they went in and did that, but do you believe that most of those issues surrounding the use of the 2.6, with the exception of weather conditions, have been resolved by commercial airliners?
I think for the near term, yes, that has been resolved. That does not mean that you will not see, based upon wind, weather, operational requirements, that you won't see those aircraft continue to use 1-9 left the way they are today. We believe it's being used the way that it was modeled, the way that it was intended in the environmental system.
Okay, I have that 1,576 operations have used that path since February 26th inappropriately. Is that?
I don't know if that number is spot on as far as inappropriate. I'd have to know what that qualifier was and do an assessment of inappropriate use. We did look at the use of it, determined that we thought was incorrect use of the procedure. We took action to resolve that incorrect usage, and we think that now we are seeing general aviation aircraft primarily using that procedure. And I wouldn't disagree with you that there are some Boeing 737 type aircraft that may be included in that category.
So I guess in the interest of making this dialogue productive, with this closeout, maybe you can tell us who specific, because I can tell you from people I hear from every day on this is not resolved. So who specifically, Ms. Swan, with you closing out your portion, do we contact when the problems persist?
My office. I work directly with Clark County Aviation, with Rosie Rank's office. And if there are issues brought either to
we can
her
continue
office
to work
or
with you.
yes.
Okay.
But I want to really take this opportunity to level set expectations. I personally met with many of those airlines with their director of flight ops in March and April to implement standard operating procedures so that their pilots knew to not ask for that departure. And specifically that if they did, they would be followed up with, so outside of weather-related departures, it could also be because of the aircraft helping to, a requirement due to what happens to the aircraft. and then they have to justify that.
Do you know how many have been followed up with? Or is that data that we could perhaps get?
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, the question is, I'm gonna turn in here, the question is, you just said that the policy is, you met with all of them to not use it, and if you did use it, that you would be following up with them to figure out why they were using it or what had changed. So Commissioner Knapp is asking you, how many of those have you addressed? He believes there's a little over 1,000 that have been used, and how many of that 1,000 have you followed up with?
And understand, I don't recognize the 1,000 plus that you have those numbers. We don't have those same numbers, to my knowledge. Again, I am not the air traffic controller in the Las Vegas Tower.
So maybe we could get together and talk about how many you acknowledge that have inappropriately used the departure route, and of those, how many, I think it's very simple. You're saying that the corrective action is to follow up with the pilot who's being accused of inappropriately using the departure.
The corrective action for me would be to follow up with the airline
Okay.
to say, hey, you agreed to not request this departure unless operationally necessary, or when dictates, weather dictates. So,
I'm not sure how we qualify who's using it.
How many people have missed one? How many airlines has missed one? Followed up with how many cases has that happened? Is what I'm trying to understand.
we have followed up for the first 2 months after the initial meeting. We don't
So
feel
beyond
that the
the-
number dictates now to follow up. If you and I meet and that's not the case, then I'm happy to follow back up with those airlines.
Okay, thank you. And then just in the closing, we're number 11, right, of implementation?
Actually, we're number 10. Number 11 is South and Central Florida that just implemented on August 12th.
How have the 9 prior to us?
I would say that they're a mixed, I think it's a mixed bag. I'm not sure exactly how you're trying to qualify that. We've got a host of fans in Florida, and we've got, 5 communities that are suing us in Miami. But we have a host of other fans who love us. We've seen litigation in some instances, which we normally have prevailed in. I would expect that'd be the case in, if we manage our projects correctly, we should have fewer problems or few problems with litigation.
I guess I'd offer, since 3 of those Metroplex projects have been within my region, I would tell you that out of those 3, this is the most successful implementation we've had. And that's one of the reasons we've been recognized within and outside the agency for this project. And I would offer, so we have the NorCal Metroplex, the SoCal Metroplex, and of course the Las Vegas Metroplex. I would offer that the other commissioners on this board would recognize the benefits that the Metroplex project, and you yourself, sir, I know.
I recognize, the increase of the airspace, I get it.
Well, we acknowledge that there are neighborhoods that are affected that hadn't previously been affected. And we are taking steps to try to ensure that departure procedure is is being used as it's designed. And I would say, we're not going anywhere. Just because the Metroplex project has closed out, I'm still here.
That's the commitment I was looking for.
Air traffic is still there, so all of your normal channels that you would have, they remain. The Metroplex project team, has to stop at some point, and we did that, but your support is still here.
I I appreciate that. I'll just wrap up by saying you guys know a man named George Sims, a thank you note. He's the one who answers the phone at the Department of Aviation. He's done an incredible job getting to know a lot of my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson.
Well, I was thinking about, but I'm not sure I can ask the question well enough to get a good answer, at least try. You've known about this conflict in this neighborhood in Clark County for some time. It's not just overnight that you've learned about it. My question to you is there any way to quantify the benefit that the change in the system that affects these neighbors brought to the overall Metroplex installation and the changes that are, and the good that comes along? So, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, is this really worth it to you? Is this really that critical that minor adjustments could not be made because you would undo the benefit that comes from the Metroplex?
The reason that we implemented that procedure is to keep aircraft from the west ramp, or the GA ramp, from having to taxi across the parallels, the 19 parallels, to go to runway 26. That was the expressed intent of that procedure. There are some operational benefits for air traffic, in deconflicting with traffic off of other runways. I mean, we have to wait for, certain operations to take place before we can clear an airplane flight path that we wanted those digit and rack procedures to fly. So, can we quantify it? I don't know how we do that in, certainly in a dollars and cents perspective. I don't know that we could do that. I think we would say air traffic sees an operational benefit from having that procedure available. And that's something that I'd have to work with, the local TRACON and Tower to make sure that they concur with that assessment.
So, well, I do, because I feel like you're dancing around the direct questions, so I'm gonna be super direct, so, and I'm gonna walk this back a little bit. So, I was part of, the right turn only, right? When we did that years ago, and people were promised that, if we change the flight path, that then this is where it would be, this is what you could bank on as to where you should move, and you should have your homes and all those buildings. So the question that keeps getting asked that you don't seem to want to answer is, because if I look at these numbers and I know nothing about airlines, I know that airlines bring our tourists here, I know that 50 million people is important to our economy, but which is what Commissioner Gibson is asking you, what benefits did we do by this study in order to ensure that we could keep bringing things here, right? So we get rid of the conflicts, all those things. And the residents are asking, what guarantees do I have? Because it's a trust factor, right? It's a trust for constituents. They put their livelihoods into their homes. And if you've been here recently, none of us can afford to move ever at the costs that they're going up. So there's no, any of that. So they are now stuck. So if they were impacted today, somebody else is going to be impacted the next time. And at the same time, right, Rosemary tells us all the time, do not build under flight path zones for this very reason, right? And we don't always listen to her. So, again, and we also know that we are a special event headquarters. And so things are changing, and it's, who would have ever thought that the football players could afford to, charter a Southwest plane to come to Vegas? I don't even know what that cost looks like, and apparently, they can afford it, right? So, it's a growing pains all the way around, and what we're saying is, what is this? Because if I look at this, it doesn't mean anything to me, because I'm not the technical person, but I'm the one on the other end of the phone at 5 a.m. or 10 p.m. getting a call, because people are mad now that their house is rattling and the noise is loud and they can't sit outside to have a conversation. So if the goal was, in your numbers, the arrival time, we're burning last 2.6 gallons I mean, to me, 2.6 gallons is nothing in my world, right? So I've heard that sitting at the stoplight. So if the distance increased 1.8, what does that mean to us? And I just would hope, this is only the beginning, because they're only a little bit mad, and now they've gotten 0 answers from the federal government agency, and we can't even offer them an expectation for the long term. So we have to keep talking, because we haven't even talked about the draft coming, we haven't talked about soccer on a regular basis, so we have to have some hard conversations, and you have to help us. You have to. It's not an option, because you can pull out those letters when we don't wanna build things, in that time frame, but you have to help us fix this for the long term. Unfortunately today, as you said early on, our airport is compressed and we've built 100% around it. So you have to help us help constituents, so at the end of the day, we can coexist. And I don't know that I'm hearing that from either of you.
So, unfortunately, I come back to the fact that we can't deal with individual communities. We need to deal with this as a whole, because if.
So I'll solve that problem for you, if that's the question. You're gonna be on our agenda every quarter, and you're gonna give us some updates. So I'll just solve that for you. So you won't have to deal with them, because we'll all have meetings with them, and we'll have you here every quarter to answer our questions. I think that's an awful answer, to be honest.
Yes.
So whatever it is, at the end of the day, the constituent wants some answers, so we'll just put you on our agenda on a regular basis.
I don't know that that will be an appropriate answer from my office.
Okay. All right, well, if there's no use having a further conversation, because I'm calling my congressional delegation when we leave here.
If I could just wrap up the conversation, you can take the last word of this one, but I think what disturbed me so much about this whole process wasn't, the people in this neighborhood that are impacted didn't come to this late. Every single one of them were involved in the process from the first public meeting that was held. They signed in, they raised these very specific questions, and I give them credit, because it was, a lot of it was in the weeds, the questions that they asked. But the same people who are here today, and many who are not, they're the same people who've been involved from day one. So I think that's really what's so troubling. It's not like people came at the last minute and all of a sudden they felt the impact of this. They were involved from day one, and that's really been the most discouraging part, is that we encourage people so hard to get involved from day one, have your voice heard, be recognized, and they did, I think, everything right. And had they been told at the time what the reality was to be, I think their comments would have been a lot different at the time. So I'll leave it there, and to the chairwoman's point, I don't think we've gotten all or many answers today, but my main takeaway is, Ms. Swan, we can continue to contact you. You'll continue